Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an airline pilot, and 2022 has been the best year for airliner flight simulation ever. In this video we want to have a look at the best airliner that was released to market in this year. Please be aware that due to my affiliation with PMDG, I am not going to consider the PMDG 737s for this video, so only the Phoenix, the Fly the Mad Dog MD-82 and the Ini builds are going to be considered for this video. Also, I am going to ignore the pricing of the aircraft in question, as all that we are looking for is the best possible aircraft, regardless of how much it costs us. This video is going to be split into 6 categories, which are going to be cockpit, cabin, external model, systems, flight model, and sounds. Now I'm going to rate every single one of them on a scale of X out of 10, and it is very important here that low ratings such as 5 do not by any means indicate that the add-on in question would be a bad add-on. So even a rating of 5 out of 10 in this series or in this particular video is going to be a very good add-on. In order to make it into this video, all 3 aircraft, the Phoenix, the Mad Dog and the Ini builds, are splendid aircraft that I would without any hesitation recommend anybody to try. Also, I have ignored the BAE 146 for this video, since it did hardly feature any automation and since it did not come with a custom FMC but uses the default Citation FMC instead. Therefore I have left it out from this rating. So let's go right into it. Which one is the best airliner in 2022? We will start this with the Phoenix A320. And here it is. Overall, a very well balanced flight deck. The colors are very well matched throughout and we have high detail pretty much everywhere in the cockpit. Let's have a look at the captain's seat. And over here we can see all the textures are not only very crisp, but they are made in a very readable and a very realistic way. The entire cockpit has a little bit of wear on it, as we can see everywhere throughout. And what I really like on this one is that even the areas that are normally less used, like the circuit breaker panel, have received some very good attention to detail. And overall, especially looking at the switches, they just look used. They give this aircraft this very well used look. So very happy with the cockpit of the Phoenix A320, and that is the reason why I am going to give it a full 10 out of 10 for the Phoenix A320 cockpit. Let's move on to the next aircraft, which is going to be the Fly the Mad Dog MD-82. Now, just before I start this section, I did download a texture improvement mod from flightsim.to, and you can see the difference on screen right now. The top is the original version, where we can see there's a little bit of texture clipping going on in the shadows, and the bottom one is the improved version. But I do find this to be fair, since overall we want to figure out which is the best airliner in this video, and obviously we will look at the best that is available to you as the user. So here we are in the cockpit of the MD-82. Let's take a seat on the captain's seat, and once again we can see a very good level of details in here. So if we have a look into the instruments, you can see our screens actually follow the curvature that the actual screen has, and however, there is a little bit of a downside here in that, for example, some of the details of the RMI aren't as great, but overall, some very good detailing done up here on the textures. And if we just have a look around the flight deck, we can see some well executed details everywhere. That includes the details that are in areas that are not so commonly seen. However, we can see how the quality of the textures back here isn't 100% as good. However, that is not in your primary field of vision. So, overall, what do I think about the cockpit then? I will give the Fly the Mad Dog cockpit, including the mod available from flightsim.to, a 9 out of 10 for that it is a very realistic looking cockpit and that it feels very immersive, but it needed that little upgrade, and there are some areas in the back that are not 100% as crisp. Let's continue with the third aircraft in this row, and this one is the Ini build's A310. and I would like to welcome you all to the cockpit. I'm sure that you have all tried the A310, so you will probably have an idea of the cockpit already, so I'm just going to go over a couple of basics here. The overall texturing is done to a level that is a little bit below the previous two aircraft, and I am using the version of the marketplace already. So overall, as we can see though, some nice details on the three-dimensional instruments, and the whole aircraft does still look pretty new for that it is such an old plane, but I do quite like that. So overall, that is my opinion of the cockpit. However, there is something to consider, and that is the areas that are off the primary areas of interaction, such as the ceilings up here and the texturing back here next to the flight deck door, which aren't of that much of quality. Now, does that impede your simulation experience? No, absolutely not. Does it have a general effect on my rating on the flight deck? Yes, it does. And therefore, my overall score of the Unibuild's A310 flight deck is 7 out of 10. Next up is going to be the look into the cabin, and we'll start with the Phoenix. Every look will start right from the flight deck, and we can open the flight deck door with a single click on the door, which leads us right into the cabin. The overall cabin looks very immersive, I feel, right within the A320, and there is a lot of attention to detail here as well, like the attendant control panels, the actual galleys. Overall, the texture quality is a little bit less than it is in the flight deck, which however is definitely expected, since we want to conserve some performance as well. Some slight issues here with the textures overlapping, but nothing significant, certainly not in the areas that are of interest for us, like the passenger seats, which are overall done to very high quality. Just look at that quality of the leather on the seats there. Also, the walls are done to a really high standard, which I really love, and the passenger service unit is really worth pointing out with a very high level of detail. My overall score for the cabin of the Phoenix is gonna be 9 out of 10. It is a very good cabin, however it does have some minor details that could see improvement. Let's move on to the Mad Dog, and we'll go right into the cabin. To open the flight deck door, we need to flick that flight deck door selector up here to the unlocked position, and I'm going to show you this from this perspective so that you can see it a bit better. And here we go. This is the unlocked flight deck door, leading us right into the galley. We can see the texture quality in the galley is a little bit lower than it is in the flight deck, and the same goes for the detailing of the cabin attendant panel and the cabin jump seats, but I do believe this is a conscious design decision, since the entire aircraft is a little bit harder on your frame rate. So we can see this iconic 2-3 arrangement of the seats, and I'll just pick a random seat up here to have a look. The cabin walls are there with the details, however not as detailed as they are in the Phoenix, but overall I would say this cabin is worth 5 out of 10 points. We do have a cabin, it is there, it does do the job, but it is nothing special in that it doesn't provide us with any very high details like the other two aircraft will. Let's look in the third in the row, the Unibuild's A310's cabin, and we can open the flight deck door with a simple click on it, and that leads us right into this monstrous galley, especially compared with the previous two aircraft. Now we can see the general quality of the textures is a little bit less than in the flight deck, which is kinda expected, but overall alright. Now, moving on to the cabin crew jump seats, they are done at okay quality. However, there is no cabin attendant panel over here. But let's move on to where the cabin really shines, which is the passenger seating area. So let's go down into the first class and have a look into these seats. Again, textured with a good quality. But most importantly, we have that IFE system up here, which in flight is even telling us a lot of flight information as you are used to from a real-life IFE. So, let's move on and have a quick look into the coach class, which once again is done to the same level of standard as the business class, and that can be seen throughout the entire aircraft's cabin. And the same IFE systems are installed here as well. Also worth having a look is the passenger service unit, which we can see up here with once again a very high level of detail. Overall, This leads me to the score for the Inibuild's A310 cabin, with a full 10 out of 10, which is absolutely deserved in my opinion. Now, the Phoenix and the Inibuilds run very close, but in my opinion that A310 cabin is just that tiny bit better, giving it the full score of 10 out of 10. Next up, let's have a look into the external model of the Phoenix A320. So, the first thing that we are going to notice is that they did quite a good job on adding a lot of the details. So looking down here at the probes, we can see everything in 3D, and we can also see that the majority of text on the aircraft is readable, even though not 100% crisp. However, this is really going down to some of the very, very small details. Looking at the landing gear, we can see a lot of 3D modeling done over here. And while we can see that there is a little bit of room for improvement left, we can say that Phoenix have already said in the past that they do want to make such improvement. It's very nice to see though that all those little stickers up here are perfectly readable. Let's take a quick way out to the wingtip and have a look into the lights over here as well, which are modeled to a good degree in 3D as well. So that is the outside model of the Phoenix A320. Worth 8 out of 10 points. For that, some of the decal work is done to very high quality, and overall the aircraft model does look pretty good. But there can be a little bit of improvement done every here and there, like we saw the texture of the main gear strut was not 100% crisp, and in the beginning we saw a little unsharp textures there as well, just like on the last point of the leading edge of the wing. Nonetheless, a good 8 out of 10. Moving on to the Mad Dog. The Mad Dog's external model is, first of all, looking quite good when viewed at from a distance, so looking at it like this, it does really shine. But if we go closer to a couple of the details, then we'll see, for example, the markings on the door aren't that very well. Also up here on the radome, we can see that there is not always a very good quality in the external model. So it does look like there is a little bit of P3D left. But if we are honest, then how often do you look at it this close? So let's look at it from the distance that it is meant to be looked at. And from here we can see that the external model is done to absolutely good standard, even though with a little bit of improvement left. But as they do like to say on the door light, proudly Italian. This leads me to give the external model a score from 6 out of 10, in that viewed from a distance it is a very nice looking model, but if we get up close we can see that there could be quite some improvements made, and in the times of Max Flight Simulator we can expect those improvements to be actually done. Now let's have a look into the external model of the A310, and here it is. Now we are currently standing here in the stock Airbus livery that comes with the Addon, and moving up close we can see there is quite a bit of detail in the texturing done, and looking over at some of the more details around the landing gears and the external model, we can see there is quite some good work going on around the A310. The only one big downside that I see on this model is actually that from certain angles the nose really looks like there is some shadowing going on. You can sort of see it right now, that you can see these darker shadows pretty much everywhere on the nose section. I'm not sure if that is a bug or a feature, but it certainly does look a little strange and therefore adds a little down point to the outside model of the A310. Overall, that is worth a score of 8 out of 10. 1 point being deducted for that interesting, let's call it shadow model on the front section, and the other point being deducted for the fact that there is no paint kit available, but only a white texture that people can paint over, which can cause quite some issues for some liveries. Overall, 8 out of 10 for the external model of the Inibuild's A310. Next up, let's talk about the systems, and we will once again start with the Phoenix. The Phoenix A320 systems are basically coming from ProSim, which means they are done to a very high level of standards. Now, pretty much every switch in the flight deck is functional and working and doing what it is supposed to do by the manuals, But there is something that I would like to point out, and that is the ability to simulate a lot of failures and all kind of ways to trigger them, like conditional activation, etc., which we can see over here. What's also worth pointing out in the Phoenix is that it does come with a PDC and CPDLC system, which is something that really enhances your realism of flight. Finally worth mentioning is the EFB, which is surely the best in the business at the moment, as it does come not only with Navigraph charts, detailed departure and arrival performance calculators, but also with the Phoenix own app, which provides us with possibilities like choosing panel states, aircraft options, mass and balance, and also the SimBrief import functions, including weather details and so on. However, there are a couple of downsides to the systems as well, which are primarily in the autopilot, in that it does have some problems following the VNAV path, and that entering certain VNAV restrictions can still cause VNAV to mess up. But overall, it is still worth a score of 9 out of 10 due to some very well simulated systems with only minor issues for the developers to work out. However, they do have a very good history of fixing bugs, even though it takes a little bit of time, but when they do it, then it usually works very well. Moving on to the MD82, we get to see a very high degree of system modeling as well. First of all, the aircraft system are modeled to pretty much everything that is thinkable. I would all of a sudden not know any system that is actually not simulated in the MD82. Also, we are able to see consequences of our actions. So, for example, the aircraft doesn't have a FADEC, so you can overboost the engines, which is going to lead to an engine failure. It is also equipped with PDC and CPDLC, and it does have an EFB, which does come, for example, with the weight and balance calculator and with the performance calculator. However, it does not include Navigraph charts, which is a little down point over here. Apart from that, however, the systems are done to a very high degree, and you can see that Leonardo has spent a lot of time on these. Overall, the systems in the Fly the Mad Dog are worth a full 9 out of 10 for me, in that they are done to a very high degree, however with a few minor downturns, such as the missing Navigraph integration in the electronic flight bag and the missing ability to trigger failures from right within the simulator, but you can do that through the load manager. So 9 out of 10 for the systems of the Mad Dog. Let's talk systems. Let's talk A310. Now, for obvious reasons, the A310 is not able to hold up to the other two aircraft. However, it still is a pretty nicely done aircraft. I would categorize it as a high fidelity add-on, while the other two are study level. Now, having a look around the flight deck, we do not have CPDLC or PDC available in this one, and the overall level of system simulation is down to a point where everything that is used in normal flights pretty much works to the most extent. And we also have an EFB available, which does provide us with a basic takeoff configuration calculator with some weather requests, with a little bit of weight and balance, but all of it not on the same level as the other two aircraft. Nonetheless, it is an enjoyable aircraft, and most of the systems you are going to use during normal flight are actually there, so that leads me to categorize it at 5 out of 10. Now, 5 in this series is by no means any bad score, quite the opposite, as we are just measuring it against two add-ons which really shine on the systems, but 5 still means it is a very enjoyable aircraft to fly and has everything that you do need. And with this, we move on to the next section, which is going to be the flight model. Once again, we start with the Phoenix. And the Phoenix flight model is a very well balanced flight model, but we have to take into account here that the fly-by-wire of the A320 really masks a lot of the flight characteristics of the A320. So we're basically judging the fly-by-wire here, and the airplane does feel accurate. It follows the roll rates it is supposed to follow, and especially since Phoenix have provided some of their updates, the flight model has really gone to a point where I call it fun to fly, and where I call it believable to fly as well. There are a few downsides though. One of them is the engine handling, in that the spooling behavior is still not quite as accurate as I would like it to be, and some of the pitch power values are also not 100% accurate, which leads me to the final score of the flight model, which in case of the Phoenix A320 is going to be a full 8 out of 10. Let's have a look into the flight model of the MD-80 then. Performance figures of the aircraft do seem to be quite spot on, and the taxi behavior is really nice as well. However, something that does come to my mind here is that the aileron seems to be pretty ineffective. Now, I have not flown an actual MD-80, nor do I have experience on a simulator of one, so what I can base my judgment upon is purely the experience with the MD-80 in P3D, and then of course in MSFS, and comparing that to some YouTube videos. So it does look to me like the airplane takes a lot of aileron input to actually react, and even though there is a sensitivity slider in the load manager where you can change that, even with the sensitivity set all the way to the maximum, the plane is reacting very slowly. Personally, I would hope for a little improvement on that side, but apart from that, the flight model does feel quite good and believable. Due to this, I'm giving the flight model 7 out of 10, in that it really takes a little working with the aileron in order to get it to where you want it to be, and also maintaining speed on final isn't quite that easy. It does have a tendency to run away, which I'm not 100% sure the actual MD-80 does. At least I couldn't find a lot of comments from real-life MD-80 pilots on that topic. So, 7 out of 10 for the flight model of the MD-80. Moving on to the A310. The flight model of the A310 is a very balanced one, and you can really feel the weight of the aircraft, and then it is a heavy aircraft compared with the previous two, but nonetheless it can be flown accurately and precisely. The engines do take quite a time to spool, which however can be considered realistic seeing the size of those engines, and it is certainly something you have to take into consideration, especially on the go-around, that they will just take time to react. Overall, a well-balanced flight model, which I do really enjoy. Overall, the flight model is worth 8 out of 10 points for me. Now, why the 2-point reduction, even though I said primarily very good things about it? Well, that is because, number one, I do believe the engines should react a little bit more quickly in the range of thrust typically used on the approach, so from flight idle to something around 70% or so, and they don't. And the other point is that it does, in my opinion, have a little bit too much drag, and that the airplane does descend pretty quickly, even just at 250 knots. But apart from those points, well done on the flight model. Let's go into the final category for the day, which is going to be sounds. Once again, we are starting with the Phoenix. Overall, the Phoenix sounds are well balanced and do provide a realistic sounding A320 with a little bit of room upwards, in that if you guys know the Flight Simlabs A320 for P3D, then you will probably be accustomed to a little bit more depth in those sounds, if you know what I mean. But why don't we go and listen for ourselves? I give the Phoenix sounds a score of 9 out of 10 in that they very well represent the A320. They make you feel in the aircraft with a very tiny room upwards, but overall very well executed sounds. And once more onto the MD-80. The first thing that you are going to notice is that the flight deck is pretty quiet. However, let's first of all have a listen into some of the switches. Now those are the sounds of the switches, but you will probably say, hey, I see your engines are running, why don't I hear them? Well, and that is where my opinion somewhat goes a different way from the developer. So, the developer says that it's totally realistic not to hear the engines in the flight deck, and looking at different YouTube videos, it indeed seems to be the case that they are rather quiet. However, let's do the same demo that we did earlier on and set takeoff thrust and see what it sounds like. Please ignore all the warnings that are about to be set off.
Brake. Butt lap. Lap. Brake. Butt lap. Lap. Brake. Butt lap. Lap. Brake. Butt lap.
You could hear how the engines really only came to life when they spooled to approximately 80%. Prior to that you just didn't hear them at all. And that is something that goes on through the entire flight, in that you don't have any wind sounds and the engines are so quiet. Basically in flight the airplane sounds the same way that it does right now. And I could imagine that they simulated the sounds with active noise reduction, but it just sounds so different from all the other airplanes that it really spoils the immersion in my opinion. There are some positives though. They did simulate some great taxi sounds and sounds of the nose wheel bumping over everything. So overall, here's my score of the MD-80 sounds. And it is 5 out of 10. And that is because of the immersion killer of hardly having any sounds in flight. It may be an interesting idea to model the ANR headsets, but please do include an option that brings the flight deck to life in flight as well, like we're used to from the other aircraft. My only reference here, of course, is some YouTube videos, but it does seem that the airplane should be quite a bit louder than it is in the simulator. Moving on to the A310 then, the first thing you're going to notice is that it is quite a loud aircraft, and in general the mixing in the A310 seems to be much louder than pretty much all other aircraft we have. So taking that into account, you might have to readjust your sound settings in your computer. But let's have a listen to what the actual switches do sound like. And of course we have to do our takeoff thrust setting test. And this is the sounds of the Ini-built A310. And does it do the job? Absolutely. Could it be improved a little bit, especially the total volume of the mixing compared to other aircraft? Yep, probably. But overall, I would say the sounds are believable and they do make us feel like we're in the airplane, but with a couple downsides, such as that we hear the flaps moving from the cockpit, which is something that should definitely not happen. And the switches could be a little bit louder compared to the rest, and obviously the entire mixing could be a little bit more quiet. Therefore, 6 out of 10 for the Ini-built sounds. And this leads us to the end of our 6 categories. Now that we have reviewed every single one of them and that the points are given, we already know who the winner is going to be. So, before we are going to give out the 737NG Driver Award for the Best Airliner Add-on of 2022, let's quickly go into the different categories. And we are going to start right with the Cockpit. Phoenix got 10 points, the MD-82 got 9, and the Ini-Builds got 7 points on the Cockpit. Cabin, Phoenix 9, Fly the Mad Dog 5, Ini-Builds 10. External model, Phoenix and Ini-Builds share 8 points, and Fly the Mad Dog has received 6 points on this one. Systems, Phoenix and Mad Dog share 9 points each, while Ini-Builds gains 5 points on the systems. Flight model, Phoenix and Ini-Builds once again 8 points, while Fly the Mad Dog gets 7. Sounds, Phoenix 9, Mad Dog 5, Ini-Builds 6. Phoenix is the clear winner on the sounds. And this is all the points given. So, if you guys did some mathematics in the back of your head while we've been adding up, you already know that the winner is clearly going to be Phoenix. And this is a totally deserved victory, if I'm honest. The Phoenix A320 is an excellent aircraft for Microsoft Flight Simulator that brought so much to our simming experience this year. I'm really looking forward to see what V2 is going to look like next year, and I am really looking forward to see how their aircraft is going to evolve with the IAE and the Sharklets. Now, reviewing the final points, however, we will see that all 3 aircraft have gathered quite some point, and certainly I am not somebody who's giving out points easily. So, Phoenix 53, Fly the Mad Dog 40, Ini-Builds 46, but all of them are really good aircraft, and I can recommend any single one of them. It is not a surprise that Phoenix has won this one, since their aircraft just outstands pretty much anything else there is on the market. Now, the Mad Dog got 40 points in here, which put it behind the Ini-Builds. However, that is primarily on the points showing that have been deducted due to it being a port from P3D for a lot of parts. Obviously not entirely, so I don't want to spoil any of the development work that the developers have done. It is a great aircraft. I really enjoy flying it. You are going to see me flying it more on my channel. And finally, Ini-Builds. That A310 is an excellent aircraft. I so much enjoy flying it that it is a little bit sad that I can't invest more time into it. Well done, and thank you very much for providing it free of charge in our simulator. So, with this, I would like to once again thank everybody for watching. I hope that you've had a blast in 2022, and I'm really looking forward to what next year is going to bring, both in terms of how our aircraft are going to evolve in the simulator, of the updates we are going to see, of the new aircraft that we are going to see. And I would like to thank everybody for sticking with me on this year. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to see you all again in 2023.